Miss McFarland, I'm married. I have a son. I had a daughter, but she died. Years before that, I rode in a gang. We robbed banks, trains, held people ransom. We killed people we didn't like. Bill Williamson was in that gang. Now, if I don't capture my former brother in arms, great harm will befall my family.
John Marston has easily become one of the most beloved characters in video game history. His portrayal in the original Red Dead Redemption game helped solidify his position as a man who lived a questionable life in his youth, running with a band of outlaws that were killing, robbing, and doing whatever it took to survive. And while the gang's leader, Dutch Van Der Linde, put everything they were doing in the context of fighting for what was right in a world that was cruel and unjust, as an attempt to make everything they were doing better or somehow less savage than what it was, the truth of the matter was, it wasn't. John in the first game did his absolute best to try to redeem himself from his past, transgressions that unfortunately haunted him, that would continue to follow him, and ultimately would not let him live to see his son grow up. Red Dead Redemption 2, John is seen in a little bit of a different light, especially since the game is put through the eyes of Arthur Morgan, his older adopted brother who had more loyalty to the gang and Dutch than anybody else. Because of this loyalty, because of this refusal of Arthur to think in any way outside of putting Dutch and the gang first, John is seen as slimy, someone who can't be trusted. He committed the ultimate sin and ran off for a little over a year without saying anything to anyone. And while John may not want to be the father of Jack, accepting him as his legitimate son, or officially claiming Abigail as his prized wife, those are separate things from running off from the gang. As Arthur says, we have a code, and he knows that.
Running off on that kid is one thing, but there's a code. He knows that. He ain't Trelawney. Dutch and you pretty much raised him.
I know, but it's done. Has been for a while now.
Nobody else would have been welcomed back that easy after that long, and you know it.
By all accounts, it appears John's return to the gang was one met with little opposition besides the rift between Arthur and John growing. Even with this soured view of John appearing to be less than trustworthy in Arthur's eyes, John still helps with the gang and looks out for what Dutch would want and how best to suit the gang's needs. This is apparent through John's initiative in setting up a train robbery during the missions pouring forth the oil, and the sheep and the goats, where he and Arthur steal some cattle off some ranchers and attempt to resell them at auction in Valentine.
That is kind of brilliant. For you. That is a real idea. I think that's the first time you ever had one of them.
Shut up.
You might be the first bastard to ever have half his brains eaten by a wolf and end up more intelligent.
What's worth pointing out as well is neither of these are shallow attempts to regain Dutch's favor or even try to rekindle their fractured relationship with Arthur. It's simply John doing his part, carrying his own weight, and trying to return to what it all was like before he left. But there is no obvious attempt of him trying to mask or hide from what he had done. He pretty much owns up to it. On the one hand, yes, he did choose to run off and escape the possible obligations he may have felt he had with Abigail and Jack. Perhaps it was as simple as not being ready for fatherhood, or maybe he was off looking to find himself, or maybe it was a mixture of the two. But personal crisis or not, it's clear he was still as loyal to Dutch and the gang, and was still all too willing to do his own part. I wanted to point this out because there's two sides to John. The love and loyalty that he has to at least Dutch, and the other side, troubled by his own personal turmoil that can easily be muddled and misclassified as being disloyal or unable to be trusted. That is Arthur's view of him at the beginning of the game, and because that's Arthur's view, it becomes our view. However, it's crucial to recognize that there is in fact a difference, and that difference means if we were to really pinpoint the exact moment where John's perception and opinion of Dutch starts to change, and the reason behind it differs entirely from the beginning of the game to the moment where we actually see John's mood begin to change towards Dutch. And John's mood is much more apparent than anyone else's. And there's even a direct occurrence that led to it, an occurrence that honestly, he never was able to recover from in terms of seeing Dutch the same as he did before. And that single event was the kidnapping of his son Jack. All throughout the missions, blood feuds, ancient and modern, and the Battle of Shady Belle, John's mentality is very different. He rants about how Dutch and Hosea went too far this time. There's always money. There's always something shiny, something new for these two con men to get their hands on, and this time, the two of them flew too close to the sun, getting Sean killed and Jack kidnapped.
It's Dutch playing his games. Hosea, too. Getting involved with those two families. Master con men working their magic.
They thought there was a lot of gold.
Yeah, they thought there was money. Ain't there always?
Understandably, John is angry and in a panic, but we can't mistake this for anything other than what it is, and that's regret. John's words are nothing more than echoes of the pain and regret he has as a father, or lack of being one. No real attempts have actually been made to be a father to Jack, and John knows it. On the ride to Shady Belle with Arthur, John shares his doubts in Hosea and Dutch in their possible faulty memory, doubting if things were ever the way they remembered it to be. If they were ever the people they were meant to believe they were. He then continues to admit he rejected Jack as a son, who didn't choose this life, and is now paying for his father and adopted family's crimes. Abigail was also mistreated, and now, in this moment, John is realizing the weight of his actions. There are people counting on him, and he hasn't been as present as he should be.
I treated Jack bad. Abigail, too. I didn't want to believe he was mine.
I believe John's obligations and dedication to Abigail and Jack became a real priority for him from this moment on. We can say Arthur's own shift away from Dutch was somewhat similar, albeit much later, and only when he was on his own deathbed. Arthur eventually became hell-bent on saving as many people as he could, most notably John, who had a family, a son who could have something outside the life they all know. John's reality check technically wasn't as intense as being on the way out like Arthur's was, but Jack's disappearance and the fear of the unknown horrors that may be falling upon him was definitely one he needed, one Jack needed. What's also curious to me is how Arthur's response to all of this was. Up until now, Arthur made no reservations at telling John to just run off again. Why does he care if he went fishing with Jack when John says it's not his son? Likewise, why would he care what happens to Jack? John, after all, has made the mistake of turning his back on the gang and refusing to father this young boy once before. Why is this any different? This could have very well been another chance for Arthur to just remind John of his past mistakes and to just leave yet again. The only difference now is John's words are now directed at Dutch and Hosea, something I would think would even be worse in Arthur's eyes. Yet Arthur doesn't do what he did in the past. He doesn't repeat the same sentiments. Instead, Arthur does the opposite. He reasons with John, tells him to not overthink the situation and descend into a rabbit hole filled with anger, doubt, worry of what will happen to him, his son, his wife. Arthur admitted before that he was upset with John for leaving, but he does say it in a way that betrays more hurt from a brother who chose wrong and was so quick to throw his family away, rather than just someone who could turn their back and walk away from a fruitful past.
Oh, well, if it's John's idea, it must be a good one.
What is it with you and him?
He disappeared on us for a while. When Jack was real young, a long while. A year ago.
He did?
And we was family, you know? Guess I still ain't fully forgiven him for that.
Arthur never hated John. He probably never even wanted him to leave again either. All the anger, jokes made at John's expense, or constant reminders of his past mistakes are most likely just his own hurt being manifested in a way that would seem acceptable by everyone else. Best to hide hurt feelings behind broken loyalty after all. But back to John. In the moment, his words, everything he's saying is justified and amplified by his own personal regret. This was the eye-opener for him. In the beginning of the bank robbery in Saint Denis, John's doubt is voiced yet again, showing that even after Jack's rescue, John's mentality towards the gang, their current predicament, the situation, Dutch continuing to promise and never deliver, is a mentality that he's only doubling down on. And this time, John voices his concerns with a bigger audience and even calls out Dutch directly.
This is it, gentlemen. The last one.
Where have we heard that before?
What has happened to you, John? You lost all your heart.
I'm just trying to stay real about all this.
Real? Oh, how I detest that word. So devoid of imagination.
The relationship between Dutch and John only gets more complicated from here, with John accusing Dutch of letting him get captured during the Saint Denis bank robbery, then Dutch implying to Arthur that John or even possibly Abigail may be the rat in the cave on Guarma.
So what happened with John in that bank?
He survived. Unlike dear Hosea and Lenny, the only one they took alive. Why is that, you think?
I don't know. I was already on the roof. I didn't see it.
And Abigail, I presume she was able to slip away in time.
What are you talking about?
You know, When I look back at all the chaos of the past few weeks, the apparent superficial chaos, I begin to wonder, maybe, for somebody, this is all going exactly to plan.
Followed up by Dutch seemingly dragging his feet to save John from Sisika Penitentiary, and then leaving John to die at the end of the Beaver Hollow train robbery after John was shot. It's really a different topic to question if Dutch even still harbored any type of hard feelings towards John forever leaving. Hosea does say it was gone, it was done and dealt with a long time ago. Arthur even says that Hosea and Dutch forgave John, but maybe deep down he never did. It's possible. And the fact that John was so willing to call out Dutch in front of everybody, questioning his leadership skills, all too aware of the current predicament that Dutch found himself in. Dutch may be narcissistic, he may be full of himself, he may be charismatic and a dreamer, but he's not an idiot. Accounting the losses all the way up until this point, and the fact that he was played for a fool by Angelo Bronte, and the Braithwaites and Grays tried to do the same, and now he's hearing a dissenter within his own ranks. Maybe it was this moment exactly where Dutch made up his mind that John really wasn't needed anymore. The potential rage Dutch felt in this moment towards John could have very well brought to the forefront of his mind that this man, this son of his, had left before. He had turned his back on him, and he'll do it again. John's belief that Dutch allowed him to get captured in Saint Denis, followed by Dutch's lack of enthusiasm of saving John, or Dutch's overall behavior during the chapter of Beaver Hollow, where he's starting to get closer and seemingly listen to more of Micah, isolating Arthur and John, and then of course it all compounded by John getting shot on the train with Dutch and Micah refusing to go back and save him, all made that original thought. The perspective of Dutch playing his games become all too real to John. That was the moment John became a doubter in his father. That was the moment John's priorities shifted, and for the first time he owned up to all the wrong he did to Abigail and Jack, out loud, even if it was in the sense of extreme regret. Because of the current situation that Jack was placed in, it was still a realization, the reality that he placed on his wife and son. Honestly, Jack's kidnapping may have caused a deeper rift in the gang than most of us ever even realized. What do you think? Do you think Jack's kidnapping played a pivotal role in changing John's mentality, or do you think that was something that was always in the back of his mind, or it was really Saint Denis or any other event that caused the actual rift? I want to hear what you think down below. And of course, like always, if there's video ideas, suggestions, or anything else you want to see, please feel free to share that stuff down below. But like always, thank you so much for watching, and to the next video, maybe check out any other theories or analysis that I may have.